It has been fantastic to be here for the last few months. You know your family when people start giving you nicknames. Vicky has been calling me Columbo. Partly because I wear a raincoat. Every time I've come, I brought rain. There was rain Saturday morning. But the other thing is like Columbo, I'll ask a curious question that I think I already know the answer to. And so, but it's been warm. I've received a lot of encouragement and respect. And so today we're going to talk about things that are going to be perhaps very inspiring, but there's a gut check. Taking a look. That's why you brought me in. You didn't bring me in to give wonderful platitudes, right? So you brought me in to help do a reality check, to look underneath the hood of the church. So if we could pull up the first screen. There we go. Let me come back here. So this consultation report is a preliminary draft. It's at high level. It doesn't get down into the weeds like the final report will. But I wanted to give you an overview because this is the end, coming to a close of phase 2. I'll still be working with OC through the month, behind the scenes, but this will be my last official time here until I'm invited back. If this was for the sermon part, if you like sermon titles, it would be called "Consider Carefully What You Do," and that's a quote from a character in what we're about ready to read. So, in order to be honorable, I am going to start the timer. That's important, right? So we're going to look at a story, but first I need to tell you where my consultancy started 12 years ago. I wanted to know what are the primary options available to churches that are navigating turbulence that comes with transition, change, and troubles. And I found a passage that really was helpful to me. It kind of gives like an arc of what can happen. In the story that we're going to read, there's a prologue where there's no problem. There's a drift where a problem is about to happen. There's a failure. There's alarm from the failure. There's an assessment. As a result of that, looking back, we need reset. And then there's a stage of renewal. So we're going to be looking at those kind of things through the story of Jehoshaphat and Judah. Now, the prologue, the Canaanites worshipped El, which means God, and the Israelites worshipped El Shaddai, a specific God, and there's only one God, and it's Yahweh. Baal had a girlfriend, Asherah, who enticed people in immorality. Ahab was the king, and Jezebel was the queen, and she was the one who enticed people. And so Judah opposed Baal and Asherah because they were on the right side of history in all this. These were their neighbors. So then we come into a drift. Jehoshaphat was king of Judah. Judah was the rightful kingdom. Israel was the schism out of rebellion that took place after Solomon had passed away. Jehoshaphat's son married Jezebel's daughter. This begins to be a problem. I mean, how did that happen, right? The two kings ended up bonding, and the friendly Ahab pursued an alliance with Jehoshaphat. Now, the king of Aram, another kingdom, intended to assassinate Ahab. Ahab said to Jehoshaphat, "I will enter in battle in disguise, but you wear your royal robes." Well, why would you say do that? So they'll get you, not me. Crazy. Jehoshaphat became Aram's prey. And Aram's commanders pursued what they thought was the king of Israel, but was Jehoshaphat, nearly killed him, then recognized who he was, saw the ruse. Ahab ended up dying by a random arrow, just fortunately through the providence of God, takes him out. But Jehoshaphat nearly lost his life. This is failure and alarm. We went from back history to drift to now a situation where something really bad almost happened, but it indicates something's really wrong. And so next we actually have to talk about having an assessment. Now this is really important. I want to say every leader in this room pay close attention. Each king who ended well in the Old Testament had a prophet or seer in their life. Okay? That's really important. 1 from Israel, that was David. 5 from Judah, Asa, Jehoshaphat, Jotham, Hezekiah and Josiah. And Josiah's seer was Jehu. And like Jeremiah was told to, in his era, comes later, assay Judah, which is the same word when you test silver to see if it's pure. It's like test, evaluate the ways of the people. And that's what a seer or a prophet does. They're supposed to like inspect, kind of a model for what a consultant ought to be able to do, right? So that's kind of why I'm here. Now, let me tell you, let's read the story. When Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, returned safely to his palace in Jerusalem, Jehu the seer, the son of Hanani, went out to meet him and said to the king, "Should you help the wicked and love those who hate the Lord? Because of this, the wrath of the Lord is on you. There is, however, some good in you, for you have rid the land of Asherah poles and have set your heart on seeking God." Jehoshaphat catches his breath. I'm not all bad, right? Jehoshaphat lived in Jerusalem, and he went out again among the people. This is the time for a reset. And from Beersheba to the hill country of Ephraim, and turned them back to the Lord, the God of their ancestors. So he took it to heart. He heard what the consultant said, and he took it to heart. He appointed judges in the land and each of the fortified cities of Judah. He told them, "Consider carefully what you do, because you're not judging for mere mortals, but for the Lord who is with you whenever you give a verdict. Now let the fear of the Lord be on you. Judge carefully, for with the Lord our God there is no injustice or partiality or bribery." In Jerusalem also Jehoshaphat appointed some of the Levites, priests, and the heads of the Israelite families to administer the law of the Lord and to settle disputes. Now I want to park there for just a moment. When Jethro gave Moses advice, Moses who was handling so many problems, he developed a scaled level of competency and experience, those over tens, 50s, hundreds, thousands, or whatever, to handle conflicts, disputes among the tribes. 40 years later, in Deuteronomy chapter 1, Moses reflects on having done that, and he has very specific criteria for what those dispute handlers would be, and he implemented it and he made it even more resilient. This is what I believe Jehoshaphat is doing. He's taking a page from the past and right-sizing things by what he knows will please the Lord. And they lived in Jerusalem. He gave them these orders: "You must serve faithfully and wholeheartedly in the fear of the Lord in every case that comes before your people who live in the cities, whether bloodshed or other concerns of the law, commands, decrees, or regulations. You are to warn them not to sin against the Lord, otherwise the wrath will come on you and your people. Do this, and you will not sin." Now, this gets really interesting. "Amariah, the chief priest, will be over you in any matter considered concerning the Lord." So there's a spiritual authority, Amariah. "And Zebediah, son of Ishmael, the leader of the tribe of Judah, will be over you in any matter concerning the king. And the Levites will serve as officials among you. Act with courage, and may the Lord be with you, those who do well." But here's the part I want to focus on. Ishmael, the leader of the tribe of Judah, will be over you in any matter concerning the king. The king is now under authority. Okay, so they have spiritual authority, they have tribal authority that's even over the king, and of course the king is the leader, which is usually governance, military, things like that. So Jehoshaphat humbled out, put himself in a situation that was going to be best for the people. Let's talk about the OC. In August, on the 18th of last year, James Willis informed the Ministry Leadership Council that the OC staff will be requesting help. There had been a problem with it. There was a departure of a beloved staff member. There was internal turmoil. There were strong things felt in the South ministry and strong things felt in the Korean ministry. And so this was coming. 2 days later, there was an anonymous letter that was sent asking for a formal investigation into the leadership of the OC region. And then 6 days after that, the MLC received the official request from the staff and the elder. And so then we move into a new phase, okay? We're going to be moving into assessment. So August to January, the Orange County Service team, which is like a task force that was set up to respond to the 2 requests, take them seriously, show respect that there's something up, and then they moved into what would later be looked back and be called Phase 1. Now, of course, Robert and Michelle are on that group. They're here today. And others who have been in and out are on that as advisors or part of the regular team. We've been meeting about every week or 2 weeks since I've got involved. Phase 1 was interviews, survey, various meetings, and an initial report. Phase 2, organizational leadership restructure, required somebody to be on the ground. I was interviewed by the staff and the Orange County Shepherding Group, along with the task force, the service team, to be here for 3 months, which would have ended in April. We've added a month. And so what we're doing is going into Phase 2. My job is to review findings of Phase 1, make sure I fully understand what they came up with, and then to review correspondence, some that they received and then a lot that I've received since I've been involved. I've conducted interviews, about 50 people I've met with in various configurations, in meetings with groups. Priority would be probing the South and Korean ministries out of respect for the request from the staff in the anonymous letter. Reconciliations. The reconciliations can work like this. There's reconciliations that are full-fledged, like mediations. Then there's reconciliations where there's a facilitated conversation. Then there's reconciliations that take place after a report comes out that has the voices of so many people in it that they know they're being heard because there's a real good, solid narrative. And it produces aha moments, and those aha moments make people go, you know what, I had the situation wrong. I didn't have it quite right. I'm going to choose to forgive. Okay, so that's kind of what happens a lot in my work. I do mediations, like sit down, go back and forth, back and forth. We've had some really great talks, even with the whole staff, where we're able to go, okay, we turn the lights on. Now we have a better story because it's facilitated. I'm an outsider. It's easy for an outsider who has no pony in the race to have those conversations, you know. And so we've done that, and then pay attention to structure. So typical discussion topics have been, let's talk about the recent developments that have been very difficult. That's perspectives around congregational trust. Legacy issues that impede the present. Let me give you an example of a legacy issue. It comes out of the software world, by the way. If there's a bug in a program like Windows 1, and then Microsoft didn't fix it by Windows 2. And it keeps carrying forth, and they didn't quite recognize that it was there. That kind of thing happens in the software world a lot. There were 2 ships requested to be built in 1904 in the Midwest. They were going to go from Chicago to the other side over in Michigan, and they were going to make a lot of money on this. These 2 ships were in competition to see which one would get done fast, which one would be faster, which one was much more luxurious and the advantage to be on. And one existed for probably 2 decades before being decommissioned, made money, did fine, hardly anything about it on the internet because there were no problems. The other one was designed to hold, I think, about 1,800 people, and then they spec'd it out, added a deck so they could put, 2,600 people on it. Then after the Titanic sunk in 1912, government regulations required putting boats up on deck, a whole lot more. You can see where this is going to go. This was the SS Eastland. Even before the additional deck for more housing, even before the boats, it had a reputation for listing. It would be like this, like a bike, until you get moving. It freaked people out, scared a lot of people. In 1915, while they were loading it up, right in the Chicago River, it capsized. They were trying to put 3,500 people on that boat, and 842 people drowned. And so there was search for scapegoats, trying to figure out who was the problem. Was it the engineer not managing the ballast and whatever? It turns out they consulted the original construction person that designed the boat. He said it was not designed for people. It was designed for cargo. The maxed out, it should have been like 500 people. That was a legacy issue. So it had some past baggage that design and structure that needed to be resorted out. And I think that's the way with churches. I'm tell you, I'm excited to say I was at a 3-hour meeting with the board and the Ministry Leadership Council, and there's a major effort to rethink a lot of things in the LA church, including structure and governance and health and major efforts. I don't even know anywhere where they're taking it as serious as what I've been hearing, but this is important. The Orange County ministry culture was a big topic, and then there were open-ended questions. So let's talk about the positives. I have felt a respectful disposition of members in interactive group settings when discussing main areas in need of review and speaking about other concerns. That's always a good sign. There's a humility and curiosity among the whole OC community about what assumptions and practices might need to change or do need to change. The willingness of the entire staff to look at their own functioning over the last few years, each individually fully engaged in the process and were helpful when discussing elephants in the room. And this is not so much a strength, but you should just know there were no concerns of a legal nature like a scandal that were brought up. Most issues were relational dynamics, structural processes, practices, and the alignment of roles. Now, those things are significant because they can lead to hurt. They can lead to bad judgments, bad decisions. But it wasn't like secrets. So let's talk now about my observations. First one being the death of the leader, Kevin Maines, with the mixture of grief and succession challenges, was significant. First of all, he was a unicorn. Nobody could do what Kevin did. Okay? And then there's a thought that maybe Kevin shouldn't have been trying to do all the things he was doing. You needed a bigger eldership and a flatter hierarchy and more team leadership. We shouldn't have that model. Now, he was noble in his doing the model, right? But we don't want to go there. And you guys already made that decision because right after he passed away, there was a sense we want a team model. We want something different. We don't want to recreate that setting. But it never really got figured out. Legacy, structural, and cultural issues. Over-reliance on top-down authoritative model, which I just mentioned. Challenges around making disciples and discipling. And this is not just OC or the LA church. This is widespread. We have words that there's no Greek equivalent of. Discipleship, discipled, discipling, those have all sorts of meaning, and the meaning evolved. It really started around the late 70s, but it didn't become like crystallized into the regular language till probably 89 to the early 90s. And just consider this, for instance. When somebody says, I got discipled. Okay. Now, the word that's used twice, Matthew 28 and Acts 14 in the Greek, some version of that word, only twice, in terms of a verb or an adjective, means to strengthen, to train, to help somebody go after the object, which is Jesus Christ. It doesn't mean correct, rebuke, humiliate. It doesn't. And so I've tried to go for long stretches where I don't say any of those words. It's hard when you're around a community where that's all we're saying, right? The earlier purity culture and its effect on young women, this is significant, came to me from multiple places, but it's not just OC. And it's actually an evangelical baggage issue in this current era. But the version that I was hearing here was that young women were being treated in a punitive way for the way they dressed, as if they were being blamed for the lust of a male. That is ridiculous. The males are responsible for their lust. Certainly, young women will need to be guided humbly and respectfully and with great tact about making them aware of what can happen with guys, but not from blaming, not from blaming. And so then the effect on parents from negative experiences with kids, and then seeing their kids not stick around. I mean, these are like, that's what the kind of significant category. Ongoing conflicts and concerns among some of the ministry staff. With the South ministry, external from some leadership, towards some leadership in the South, and there were conflicts within the South. And then the Korean ministry, also external issues that were treated as conflicts. The lack of implementation of mediation or arbitration of unresolved employment issues mandated by the LA Employee Handbook. Now, this was boilerplate, like it's in every responsible religious body. And so what you see up on the screen, this is being slightly modified for going forward, but it's basically the same substance. That this just is what you do. You get help. You're required to get help. You have no choice but to get help. And you have the right to make sure that the help that you get is unbiased. It's a very neutral third party. It may happen in the church, locally, some other part of the church where there's trusted. That can be an excellent resource. It could be in a brotherhood of familiar culture and tradition. Sometimes it's great to get it completely outside. I had a professor that used to say, sometimes the Baptists need it from the Catholics and the Church of Christ from the Jews. Okay? And there's wisdom behind it because it's usually not about doctrine. It's about finding a third way, so you break out of either or thinking, or to see how we come across to people in a conflict. That's usually a big part of a conflict, how we come across. But we need help, and they didn't get help. Staff didn't get it. Now, staff is humble about this, even admitting that, hey, I forgot about that, or I didn't even read that, or didn't know that. There's a responsibility on both ends, administration, staff leadership, and I think you should, from time to time, just rehearse scenarios that could bring out the worst in us and ask what our policies are. A low level of trust. Part of it was related to growing awareness of unresolved conflicts. And that happens not just in a congregation, that can happen in a brotherhood. That can happen. There's been times in the past where I didn't even want to go to a leadership meeting representing multiple churches because I knew for a fact that people in conflicts, not living quite right, were in prominent positions of speaking. And there were people in the room that were like rolling their eyes or going to the bathroom a lot. I've seen where people will put in their ear pods and listen to a sermon from a denominational church, which that's okay, I do that too. But in the middle of a leadership workshop? No. Related to how decisions have been made or how decisions have been communicated. Sometimes the right decisions are made, and they would have got there anyway, but there should have been collaboration and consensus building beforehand. And there should be communication. Some of the trust involves some, but not all, the staff members. And some of it's been related to unkept commitments, which leads to hope deferred. And I just want you to know, and putting this up on the slide, nobody on staff resists this. Some of it comes straight from the staff. And we've talked about it in open settings. The need for clarity on policy, authority, supervision, and covenants, including how to identify and address potential conflicts of interest. And the first part of it is about just making sure people know, even congregational members know, what are the mechanisms if there's a grievance or a concern, those kinds of things. And but here, around the conflict of interest, there's a thought out in the church world that you can't be in two roles because there would be a conflict of interest. And actually, that's not very accurate. There's an advantage and a disadvantage of having multiple roles. Here's the advantage. If you have multiple roles that are going to put you in multiple groups, you become a ligament between the groups of communication. It really is helpful. Very helpful. However, if there's not a policy and an understanding and implementation of recusal when there's a potential conflict of interest, and say, I might not be best to weigh in on this. I might not even be best to be in the room on this. Or can we pass this on to somebody else so there's no question about conflict of interest? We've got to get better on that, and that became a concern as well. So I want to show you a slide. This slide is about, it's kind of a hyperbole. And what I mean by that is, on the left is a maze, which is how it feels sometimes in organizations when we know, who do I call? What do we have written on that? Is there a manual? Is there a policy? You know, and what happens in the maze is sometimes there's an oligarchy, you know, a few kind of control things. There's an inner circle. And there's just, and I'm not projecting that here, I'm just saying what happens is we don't know why we can't get a good answer or a good outcome. But on the right side is when you have somebody can walk you through this and super informed of how the church works. Here's our policies. Here's our handbook. Here's our covenants. And if you have a concern or report something that went wrong, that a bad thing that happened, first of all, take it to the outside authorities if it's of a certain nature, right? But also, here's what we do internally, and so to make sure we're being the best, and here's how to handle it internally. And so, again, these are two extremes, but they communicate. We want an open space, and we want somebody wise who knows how the church works, you know, because we live in complicated times, so I think that's really important. And 7, there's an urgent need for more elders and other biblical roles and functions, including deacons and teachers, right? So there's an urgent need, but we're starting with the elders, top priority. If there was a robust eldership here, 4 or 5 people over the last 7 years, ever since Kevin had passed away, you wouldn't even need me. And I would say if there were strong, robust elderships in the LA church, sizable enough for the community, I would have never been needed except for workshop training. I've come in 5 very serious situations. And so shepherding is a big part of it. Governance, quality governance with the right people in those roles for these moments in time. Okay, so in the reset part of the Orange County, by the way, these slides will go out. But there are 3 changes currently underway and 6 recommendations. Would have been 9 recommendations, but you don't have to think about the first 3 here that are currently underway because the ship has sailed. We're moving in the right direction. But I want to make sure you know what they are. And then, of course, 6 recommendations going forward. First, the development of elders and deacons. We started that on March 3rd. We created a process underlying biblical criteria, nomination, vetting, review, syncing with the LA Church, syncing with the service team. We created a rep team of outstanding members within the Orange County Ministry to run things off of. And we've got the ball rolling. 37 names were put forward for an eldership. Many of them were very few nominations, and then many of them were many nominations. Some have taken themselves out. We have come down to 7 that we are still working with. And so many of those others would be great for deacons. So, but anyway, this is well underway, and I predict that there would be round 1, maybe 2, 3 over the next 6 months or so, but the first round would be probably in June. And I will tell you how this ministry will be led in my absence a little bit later. The ministry is being reimagined from top down, which is church history is full of top down. We've certainly experienced top down. We're moving to more gift-based, integrative, team-oriented, and this already happening. I see it. I'm in these meetings. I can officially say, I'm leading this meeting, and here's what I think we ought to do. But it's not like that, because really somebody comes in with, hey, I want to be on top of this. I want to be on top of that. What do you think? And a lot of times in our meetings with the staff, I'm just watching. Same with the RFAC meetings. There's a lot of really good chemistry going on there because we're moving in the right direction. Now, the next 3 slides might be the most important in this presentation. We're going to talk about memorializing lessons using a metaphor. The Japanese ken stands for gold, and sugi means to reconnect. A kintsugi master mends the broken ware with lacquer and covers it with gold. The repaired pottery is even more beautiful and sophisticated than the original. Organizational consultants use this metaphor to make the point that sometimes having been through something where people are broken, systems are broken, the organization is broken, becomes such a great teachable moment that you want to never forget it. You want to shine a light on it. You want to point to it. You want to talk about it so you become better because of it. It's like a superior failure. You're better because you had it, but you properly put it back together. Okay? So the staff has been going through an exercise where I sent them a 5-page document called Memorialization, Facing Previous Challenges with Integrity and Honor, and it had gut-wrenching questions in it. It's kind of a quiet time with gut-wrenching questions, reflecting what happened in this ministry. And so I think I got almost all of them in, or I got them all in, and I'm going to be harmonizing these lessons, and they'll be available to you either in the report or as a separate piece, which takes us to something that's very related. The first recommendation. There has to be repentance and some sense of atonement, which some people use it to mean we become at one again. We become at one where we're fully crossing a threshold, where we close a chapter because we figured out what divided us, what polarized us, what went wrong. And so we're going to be using the findings from the exercise, and then the staff members will stand before their ministries articulating the very personal version that applies to them. And I'm going to recommend that the elders that we have, because we may have elders, plural, by the time this happens this summer, that even maybe some future elders and shepherding people are part of that, probably a midweek, I don't know. But that there's ownership, real clear ownership. I think two bad things can happen in something like this besides the obvious good. One is an over-apology, and one is an under-apology. The second is an under-apology. The over-apology hurts the person who's apologizing because later on they go, I don't feel good, you know. And under-apology hurts the community. They feel like that person doesn't get it. I've even delayed memorialization until sometimes people get professional help, you know, therapy, whatever, from a Christian perspective, because these moments can be very intense. Trying to figure out, you know, what was done wrong. The staff will express commitments to ensure that the same errors will not be repeated in the future, and they have to be really clear, articulate, because we want to mean business here. Close that chapter through repentance and atonement. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't. Okay, so now, number 2, complete the team leadership model. That's the staff has been working on something, and they've paved some good ways by reading good books on church leadership from the team perspective. They even created a document that had a lot going for it. I think they need to wrap it up. I talked to Marcel, who I think has the document, the latest version, and he's out of town today, but I said, what I would suggest is that you guys come up with a 2-page version, because I think it might be like 10 pages. Keep it simple. And it's always divided into 2 things. Perspective gathering. When you're going to make a decision, you want to have good perspective, right people in the thinking. And then you want to define the subject well, set up the team with the team leader. Who are your additional partners? What kind of style are we using? Consensus building or collaboration? Those are 2 different things. And how are we going to communicate it? Number 3, each member, this is for everybody here, makes one another commitments. I'm going to introduce a Greek word that may change your mind about one anotherness forever. Homothumadon is formed by 2 words that mean one and spirited and passionate. And that is often translated in the book of Acts as all together or came together. Bible translators have trouble with this word, because if they would really translate it to get the full dynamic meaning, it would be multiple words. It would be, come together and be the greatest version of yourself and draw the best out of one another. It's 1 and 1 is 3. You know, it's that kind of a thing. But the original hearers knows what homothumadon is. It's a word that describes how people get unified as they're going out to war. You know, so when we walk into a room with other people, you know, small group or in fellowship, it shouldn't be like, hey, yeah, hey, we're here, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, there should be a togetherness, okay? And so I want to give you some charges here. I think we should be in the habit of getting with people we don't naturally like. So that means if somebody sets up an appointment with you today, is this because you don't like me? Live unoffendable lives. Be devoted to one another. Don't withhold your love. Carry each other's burdens. Assume the best motives. Speak the truth in love. And by the way, you should look at the passages because they say it better than I possibly have. I think if we come giving our all, don't withhold our affection, don't withhold our contribution, don't withhold our gifts from the church, and we're in, I think we're going to see some really great things. Periodically review and pivot the culture. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but the authors of this book, Pivot, make a great case for there are 7 things that show up when a culture goes bad, and it's usually not all 7. And you can probably figure out the ones that come from our history. And then on the right side, these are the antidotes. And so there would be specific ways to facilitate having conversations about this. I will have more in the report about it. I think you should develop a renewal strategy for the dispirited. My wife came up with this model over 20 years ago. There's the person who's baptized who's fired up. Then there's the enthusiast person who's grown, been around for a few months. They become a new Bible talk leader. And then after a while, they go through a bad experience and they get dispirited. That might take 10 or 15 years, but it happens. And then they get stuck and they get mad. And the 2s and the 3s don't get along with each other. The fired up Bible talk leader says, you're so into yourself. Why are you not bringing visitors? Why are you negative? That's 1990s culture, but that's what happened, okay? And so the dispirited person will say, you're just so shallow. You're just cranking numbers. You know? Again, we implemented this when that stuff was very real. The mature person values all of the earlier 3. And the mature person has been in all the 3s of them. And so they can have a gracious attitude. And when we create the space for the dispirited person to get well, they go on to maturity. And so I could actually see groups led by elders and shepherding type people and deacons where we create a space for participants to be real, to be heard, to be encouraged, to gain spiritual wisdom, and receive guidance. And I have a whole section in the report about that. Number 6, we need robust communications. There are at least 15 areas when strong communications are vital. And a plan to meet an unmet need, a dispute resolution, major expense, possible hire, all these kinds of things. We need to be, this is an area that we could probably read 5 books on and still feel like we need to read more. Not because the Bible is not clear about how to do this. The Bible modifies it wonderfully. But we are in such a sophisticated age where computers and technologies and media and all this kind of stuff, like how do we do it? How do we communicate? And I think it gets complicated. But it's one of the ways to get trust that might have been liquidated previously. Okay, so this is what happened at the end of the story with Josiah. It's the next chapter. And such a great story that I'm going to request that you read it on your own time, but here's the conclusion. And the kingdom of Jehoshaphat was at peace. And it was a huge story that took place in one chapter. They were at peace. I want to ask you, what will this story be for the Orange County Renewal? And the Orange County Church found peace, ... Because there was more to that outcome for Judah, and there's going to be more than just having peace. Fill in the blank. What do you think it ought to be? Pay attention to the scriptures and get some ideas and be a participant in a greater form of one anotherness and engaging. So, this is where we're at. Phase 3. I've got some good news here. The Orange County Service team recommended, and along with a discussion in the South last time, And in collaboration with the RFACs of the Metro and Orange County of both regions, Robert and Michelle will lead the South Ministry on a half-time basis. And they will lead the staff as well. Robert will be the spiritual director and the team leader. They will have a supervisory, authoritative role, but this is not about coming in with a pyramid. This is coming in to continue the work started with the service team, what I've been doing, and this is a 6-month engagement that could go longer, okay? And he will be working in close partnership with the elders when it comes to mapping out his schedule and stuff, but he's got a good start plan. Robert will be completing the elder process. The 2023 survey from last fall, which you've not seen the results on yet, Robert this month is doing an exact version of that with the quantifiable questions, and you will get released the findings of both side by side. And Robert will be collaborating with you in the selection of a long-time leader in the kind of collaboration processes we've been having these last few months. So we are really coming around the corner. Phase 3 starts June 1st. That's when Robert and Michelle start. I will be working with Robert and Michelle and the service team and the staff for the rest of this month. And, you know, if things get glitchy or weird just because, you know, let's say Robert gets sick or something, I'm a phone call away or a Zoom meeting away. And I'm with this story, waiting, praying, and encouraging till we really cross over into full renewal. And I want to say it's been an honor to be with you. Thank you very much.